Today's daf in Masechet Zevachim is daf Nun Vav 56, and we are at the second to last line on Nun Hey Amud Bet. Find this Gemara here. Okay, so we're going to talk today about the size of we'll call it the Azara, and the picture on the bottom left is a helpful picture. As I said yesterday, it's only part of it, right? Because it starts basically at the Ulam, which is around halfway in, or a little bit, I think more than halfway in. Further down, or further to the east in the map in Rashi, would be the Mizbeach, and then the entranceway, and all of those things. And that whole rectangle is called the Azara. Says, and we said yesterday that in that space you have to shecht kachim kalim, so anywhere within that space, and we talked about all the doors and the windows that helped to make sure that everything had an opening. And you can eat kache kachim, which we're going to question today. Says Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, there's a whole other halacha, of course, which is that you're not allowed to walk into the Azara if you're tummy. So what does the Azara mean? Says Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Ein chayavin mishum tuma, ela al, turn the page, orech, kuf, 187, al rochav 135, like 135. So that the rectangle of the Azara is 187 amot length by 135 amot width. The Gemara in the Mishnah in Midot goes through all the measurements, like how you got to this 187, and adds it all up, the space of each thing. But that rectangle, which includes the Mizbeach and includes the Kodesh and the Ulam and the Kodesh Kodashim, is the space in which a person who's Tameh and goes inside becomes Chayiv Karet or Chayiv bring a Karban if it's by mistake, all the halachot of Tumah in the Beit HaMikdash. Tani Kamed Rav Nachman, and there was a Tana who said this same exact thing in front of Rav Nachman. Kol Hazara ita 187 rocha 135. The whole size of the Azara was 187 over by 135. Amar Lei, so Rav Nachman said to this Tana, Hachi Amar Li Abba, my father told me. It's never clear exactly who Rav Nachman's father was because there's different Rav Nachmans, right? But my father told me, Kigon Zeh, that in this space, this 187 by 135. Kohanim nichnasim l'sham. That's where the Kohanim would enter. V'ochlin sham kachei kadashim. They would eat their karbanot there. V'shochatin sham kachim kalim. And they would shecht kachim kalim in that space. V'chayavim mishum tuma. And they are chayav mishum tuma. So basically, this is the Azara. This is where you do all your things. Now, ask the Gemara, of course, why do you have to give me all this space? What are you excluding, right? Lemute mai, meaning what's the point? The Azara is the Azara. What's the point of coming and saying only 187 by 135? So it says, well, maybe it's lemute chalonot, right? If you have windows, remember, obviously in those days, their windows were not as thin as our windows. So they have these thick windows, like you see, that might be, a foot or 2 feet or in depth. Maybe the windows, as they go outside, right? So that the Azara ends, you open a window, maybe the 2 or 3 amot, 2 or 3 feet of the window are included, and the bright is coming to tell you to exclude them, or delatot, or the doors, which is the same thing, right? A doorway might be thick. And again, anyone's seen a door made out of stone, right? They're very thick. Or ovei choma, maybe the width of the wall. And Rashi says this means the top of the wall. So the wall is, say, I don't know, 1 or 2 feet thick. And if you're standing on top of the wall, can you sit there? Can you eat your kache kadashim sitting on top of the wall? So if the bright is there to tell you that's excluded, because that's not in the 187 by 135, that's not true. Because Tanina, there's a brighter that says explicitly, it's a Mishnah actually, hachalonot v'oveachoma kilifnim, that the space inside the windows and the width of the wall are inside, meaning they're in the Azara. So you can sit there and eat your karban. So what is the brighter coming? What is the teaching coming to exclude? Ella must be lemute lishachot. It must be it's excluding the chambers, the offices. Remember, on the outside of this Azara, it opened up into offices. And those offices, were outside of the space, though they opened into the Azara. So it says, but what are you saying? That they're not included in the space and you can't shecht your karban there and you can't eat it? If they are built in the chol, meaning they're built in the regular space outside of the Azara, but their opening is to the Kodesh, their opening is to the Azara, Hatznam, we learned in the Mishnah Maser Sheni, Tochan Kodesh. Then in fact, it's Kodesh. So you could shecht your animal and eat your karban inside the lishka, even though it's not in the Azara, it's outside the 187 by 135. Says, well, you're right. Midoraita, it is Kodesh. But Midorabanan, that's what the whole point of these Gemaras were, is that Midorabanan, they basically said, don't do it in that space. Because if you do it there, you might do it somewhere else. So Midorabanan, they said, don't do it in a lishka that's outside of the Azara, even if it's open, and even though Doraita, it's supposed to be part of the Azara. Is that true? Midoraita low, right? I'm sorry, the opposite. I said they're Kodesh Midorabanan. The Midoraita, they're not Kodesh. Only in regards to Maaser Sheni, which is where that Mishnah is referring to, they added on a stringency that you should treat it like inside Midrabanan and not go there if you're Tameh and things like that. But Doraita, it's not considered to be Kodesh. Ask where is that true? Doraita low? That Midoraita, these areas of the Lishkot, the chambers outside of the Azar are not Kodesh. But Tanya, but there's a Beferish Braita which says the following. Lishachot Penuyot Bechol Ptuchot LaKodesh. You have a chamber outside the Azara that's built in the Chol, and it's built in the regular space that's not the Azara, but the opening is LaKodesh, the opening is to the Azara. Says the Braita, Minayin sheKohanim nichnasim sham ochlim sham kachikachim shiyari mincha. How do you know the Kohanim can go into those spaces and have their lunch, right, and take their kachei kadashim, and take the leftovers of the mincha, remember the mincha has to be eaten inside as well. How do you know that that's permitted, right? Where my Talmud Omer, the pasuk therefore says, when you eat the karban, right? It says the beginning of the pasuk is don't eat it outside, right? Don't. Sorry, it says you should eat your karban in a makom kadosh, and then it says bechatzar ohel moed yochlu, eat it in the chatzar ohel moed. Right? Why did it have to add the second part? It should have said just eat your thing b'makom kadosh. Why did it add the words eat it b'chatzar olam moed to tell you at Torah chatzirot harbeitzah achila achat? It's telling you can eat your thing in many different spaces. And what that tells us is not only the space of the makom kadosh, which is the actual azara, but even the chamber that's right outside that's opened into the azara. The Torah is explicitly including that chatzar. So you see, midoraita, you're allowed to eat it in this space. It's not just midrabanan. Says Rava, you're right. That is the way you read the pasuk, but that is only la'achila shan. That's only referring to eating it. That in terms of eating it, the chamber outside of the azara that's open to the azara is considered to be bifnim. But for tuma, it's not. And remember, the statement we had earlier was the inyan tuma. Now, the inyan tuma, that's not considered to be tuma. And if you go there betuma, it's not like you went into the Beit HaMikdash betuma. Says, is that really true though? Aval tuma lo? Is it true that the inyan tuma, the lishkot that are built outside, that are open to the azara, are not considered to be part of the azara? But Tanya, but there's another braita. And the braita says, lishkot habenuyot lachol ptuchot lakodesh, right? Exactly the case we're talking about. These chambers that are built in the chol, they're built outside the space of the azara, but open into the azara. Kohanim nichnasim l'sham. Kohanim can enter the space, and they can eat their karbanot in that space. And ein shochatim sham kachim kalim, but they cannot do shchita of kachim kalim. Chayavim mishum tuma, right? And they're chayim mishum tuma. So remember, there's three different rules that we're talking about here. One is it kodesh for eating kachim? Is it kodesh for shechting kachim kalim, which have to be shechted in the azara? And is a person who goes in there betuma tameh? This Braita very curiously says, well, it's considered the azar for 2 out of 3, but not 3 out of 3. And obviously that seems really strange, right? So a Kohen can eat kachim there, they cannot shecht kachim kalim there, and you're chayv mishum tuma, which goes against what we just said, that linyin tuma, it's only 187 by 135, and these places would not be included. Says the Gemara, well, clearly this Braita is a little confused, because why would it be kibifnim for 2 out of the 3? Lav amrid ein shochatim. Right, the Braita already said that you can't shech there. So what it meant to say was "Tinami ein chayavim mishum tuma." It meant to say you're not chayav for tuma. So the first halacha of the Braita was that the Kohanim can eat their kachim kadashim there. We'll see why in a second. But they cannot shech the kachim kalim because it's not the azara. And then change the Braita to say ein chayavim mishum tuma. They are not chayav mishum tuma because, like we said in the beginning of the daf, these places are not considered to be inside the azara. So that's how you read the Braita. Says the Gemara. Bishna says where that's a very nice way to change a Braita, but I don't really think that they necessarily are the same thing because Bishma ain't shochatim, right? I understand. Remember now, what's the requirement for each of these halachot, right? Remember for shchita, we said this yesterday. It says that you have to shech the animal petach oel moed in front of the door of the oel moed. And we understood yesterday the door has to be open. You have to be able to see the door, right? That's why we had all the extra doors. But I understand that if you're in a chamber that's outside of the Azara, even if it opens into the Azara, you're not in front of the door because you're in a different room, right? So Bishlama in Shochatim, I understand why this lishka outside is not kosher for shchita because ba'ina keneged petach veleka. You need to be in front of the door, and it doesn't say that. But by Tumah, it never says anything about a door, right? It says don't go into the Beit HaMikdash b'tumah. So why would you say La'in chayavim amai? Why would you say necessarily that if you're in this lishka that's outside, that you would be not chayav for tumah? What's the connect? Right? Why not? If it's open to the kodesh, it should be kodesh. Says Gemara, well, you're making a big assumption there. You're saying that ein shochatin is possible because you can't see the door, but you can certainly be in a chamber where you can see the door, right? Let's say the chamber is facing the door. So according to your rationale, ein shochatin, when it says you can't shecht kachim kalim in this lishka outside of the azara, maybe it's talking about a case where there is a door. Mila askina dika shchita keneged petach. Right? Maybe this chamber is right directly in front of the doorway, in which case you're looking right out into the door, right? And you're saying that still you're not able to shecht inside that space. Because if that wasn't the case, what do you need a brighter to tell you? You can't shecht in a chamber that can't see the door. No one can shecht anywhere if you can't see the door. And it must be that even though you're in your chamber, you can see the door, you're in front of the door of the Ol Moed, but still Tni Ein Shochatim. It says you can't shecht in that space Mishum Delo Kaddish, because it's not Kodesh in the Kedushat Azara. Even though it's outside and open to the Azara, it's not the Azara. So therefore, Tninami Ein Chayavim. Therefore, I would say also Ein Chayavim Mishum Tuma, because basically this chamber outside of the Azara is not the Azara. And since it's not the Azara, you can't shecht kachim kalim. You are not chayav for Tuma if you go into that space. I asked the Gemara the question that, of course, is the obvious question, is what about the third category, right? The third thing we talked about was eating. And so we're basically, this Breita said very clearly that you're allowed to eat the Kadshe Kadashim in this lishka that's outside of the Azara. Why? Don't you need to eat the Kadshe Kadashim in the Azara? Right? Says the Gemara, is it true? Now you're implying that you don't need to, right? La'achila, you're saying la'achila lo ba'inu keneged ha'petach? Are you saying that for eating, you don't need to be in front of the door, right? And that's why it's permitted to eat the Kadshe Kadashim in this outside lishka. But what about the Breita that we quoted yesterday? Tanya, we had this whole Breita yesterday. The Reb Yossi, Reb Yehuda Omer, Yossi Reb Yehuda said, Shnei pishpashin hayu bebeta chalifot. There were two openings, we call them small doors, I guess, in the Beit HaChalifot, meaning the section behind the ulam, where the Kohanim would put their knives or put their clothing. There were two openings there. Govhan Shmona, they were 8 amot tall, Kedei la'achshir Azara, to open up the entire, to machshir the whole Azara, la'achilat kadshe kadashim, or the shchitat kachim kalim, so that the entire Azara would be suitable for eating kadshe kadashim and for shechting kachim kalim. So very clearly, the Breita said that you need to have a doorway, and you need to therefore be able to see the Petach Olam Moed for both things, for eating, for shechting kachim kalim, and for eating kadshe kadashim. And you're now telling me that these lishkaot that are outside of the Azara, that are open to the Azara, are not kosher for shechita because they're not considered inside, but they're kosher for eating. This Breita clearly says that the same requirements go for both. You have to be physically inside the Azara and be able to see a door in order to eat or to shecht. Says Ravina, you're right. The Breita is very problematic. So change the Breita. Sami mikan achila. Take the word achila out of the Breita. It's a mistake. Meaning the Breita is wrong. The Breita was maybe said over incorrectly, but it's not the intent. The only requirement is the shechita. And Tuma, of course, but Shechita is the only requirement. The Achilat Kadshe Kadashim does not have to be done in a place where you can see the Petach Olam Moed. It has to be done in the Azara, but we extend that to mean even a chamber outside of the Azara that's open into the Azara, right? But that Breita should not have mentioned Achila in the same category as Shechita because they have vastly different rules, we're going to say. Says the Gemara, but what about the Pasuk? I mean, that's very interesting. There's a pasuk that says Vachdiv. There's a pasuk in the Vayikra in the beginning in Shmini. It says Bishlu et habasar petach olam moed. Right. This Moshe says to Aaron and Banav, take the meat from the karban. These are the karbanot that were brought at the Chanukat Mishkan. Take the basar, cook it, and at the entranceway to the olam moed, petach olam moed, the same words, visham tochlu oto. and you have to eat it there. So the Torah very explicitly says that by Kadshe Kadashim, right? Obviously not every karban, but Kadshe Kadashim have to be eaten Petach Ohel Moed. So it's the same requirement as Shechtin Kachim Kalim. Answers the Gemara, the answer we had many times, Kedushe Sha'a Shani. It's true that you had to do that for the karban of the Miluim, but that was a specific karban for that time. Remember, the karban of the Miluim was done one time to inaugurate the Mishkan. And so there were special rules for that, but those rules do not apply for the rest of time. And so it's only true that the karban of the Miluim has to be eaten Petach Olam Moed, but by other Kadshe Kadashim, they have to be eaten in the Azara. But there's no requirement of Petach Olam Moed, and therefore you wouldn't have to make these extra doors in order to eat behind the Ulam or behind the Kodesh Kodashim. Because although you're in the Azara, who cares if you can see the doorway? You only need to see the Petach for Shchita of Kachim Kalim. And the second halacha of today is that not only do you not have to see the door in order to eat, but if you're in a lishka, if you're in a chamber that's outside of the Azara, but it's open to the Azara, you are allowed to eat Kadshe Kadashim. You are not allowed to shecht Kachim Kalim or anything else, and you are not chai for tuma, at least midaraita, right? You're not chai for tuma because those chambers are considered to be outside of the Azara, and that was the point of the halacha of today. So now that's all very clear, and we're up to the 2 dots, 5 lines on the bottom of Daf Nun Vav, Amud Aleph. Says Rav Yitzchak Rav Dimi, a very interesting halacha, which we talked about a lot on Shabbos, but we'll catch Miriam up, which is minayin l'dam shenifsal b'shkiyat hachama. How do you know that a karban that has blood becomes pasul b'shkiyat hachama? Right now, what does that mean? So Rashi understands very, very strangely, but we'll see why he has to say this, that it means, let's say you shechted an animal in the afternoon, you have the blood, you didn't do zrika yet on the mizbeach, right? You take the blood and you put it on top of the mizbeach, because remember, things that are put on top of the mizbeach don't have to come down in general. I guess you stir it all night long. You can't sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach at night, of course. We know that, and we'll talk about where we learned that. But you can maybe save it till the next morning. It doesn't become pasul belina because it's sitting on the mizbeach, and the next morning you could sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. That's what you would have thought, right? The pasuk's going to come tell you that's not the case, but that would have been the hava amina. So now Tosas is very, very, very bothered by that. He says it doesn't make any sense. How could you assume that leaving something overnight is not going to pasul a belina? And that's where Tosas, the Rabbeinu Tam here, it's a very, very famous and important Rabbeinu Tam, goes through his shita that that there's two times we call shkiyat chama. Right, the very famous shita of Rabbeinu Tam, that there's the beginning of shkiyat chama, which is still daytime, and there's the end of Shkiyat Chama, which is probably around 45 minutes later, which is when the night starts, basically. And sometimes when we say Shkiyat Chama, we mean one, and sometimes the other, and we never tell you which one so that we can keep you on your toes, right? And here, what the question really is, let's say you're talking about that first Shkiyat Chama, not where the sun goes down, but where the sun is starting to go down or thinking about going down. And there, it's still the day, right? It's not Shabbos yet, you can eat stuff. But the question is, do we add time and say you can't do the karban blood at the end of the day, from the beginning of the first Shkiyat Chama? Well, it's a little difficult later in the Gemara to read Tosas in, but this is Rabbeinu Tam's opinion about, throughout, which leads to, of course, the whole thing we call Shitat Rabbeinu Tam. But that's a different discussion. But this is the question of the Gemara. How do you know that blood of any karban is pasul with Shkiyat Chama, either with Rashi's pshat, when it gets dark and you can't use it the next day, or Rabbeinu Tam's shot, a little bit of time is added on before it actually gets dark, in which it's pasul. Shenemar, it's based on the following pasuk. Pasuk says, and this, we'll see why we're quoting all this, but this pasuk is written by Shlamim. It says, Biyom hikrivo et zivcho ye'achel, right? On the day that you are makriv, of course, is the word of bring close, which usually means sprinkle the blood. On the day that you bring the karban, you should eat it, right? Now, that seems to be extra, because it could have just said, Biyom yizivcho ye'achel, right? You just do it on the day of your zevach. Why does it connect the extra word hakrivo, that the day that you bring the offerings to Hashem, which means the blood, you can eat it, that we use the extra word bayom there. So the word bayom is there, not the extra word bayom, but the context of bayom, to tell you, Biyom shata zoveach ata makriv. On the day that you slaughter the animal, you can be makriv the blood to the mizbeach. But biyom shiata zoveach iata makriv. On the day that you don't slaughter it, you can't be makriv, either according to Rashi the next day or according to Tosfot the end of the day. there's a special rule that there's a connection between the hakrava and the zvicha, the slaughtering of the animal, which obviously happened during the day, and the bringing the blood on the mizbeach. So this extra pasuk tells you that biyom hakrivot zivcho ye'achel. Says the Gemara, but that doesn't seem like a great proof because you need this pasuk to tell you that you're going to eat it on that day. Haimi baile ligufei. Turn the page to daf nun vav amabet. Don't you need this pasuk to tell you that you're supposed to eat a carbon shlamim on the day that you shecht it, right? In Cain, you're right. But if it was just telling you ligufei nima krap biyom zivcho yeachel, as I just pointed out, it could just say on the day of your zevach, the day you slaughter it, you can eat it. Why does it say biyom hakrivo et zivcha? Hakrivo lamali. Shmami, no, you see that there's a connection between the hakrava, meaning the bringing of the blood, and the zvicha. Biyom shata zoveach atam makriv. On the day that you slaughter it, you can bring the blood. Biyom shiata zoveach yata makriv. On the day you don't slaughter it, you can't bring the blood to the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, but maybe that's not the point. Dilma hachikamer. Maybe what the Torah is telling you is that there's a connection between the day you slaughter it and sprinkle the blood and the time you get to eat it. Remember, and this is very, very important as we go forward. Remember, the Torah says about a carbon shlamim that on the day that you remember biyom zivcha biyom. What's the beginning of the pasuk? Biyom hakrivot zivcho ye'achel. The pasuk says macharat. Right, you can eat it on the day that you bring the karban, and you can eat it the next day. This is the halacha of a shlamim. If you bring a shlamim on Sunday, you eat the shlamim on Sunday and on Monday, and then it says what's left over till Tuesday, you've got to burn. So maybe the halacha is there to tell you, look, Yom shata zoveach ata makriv. I'm sorry, if you do the right thing, and on Sunday when you shecht your animal, you sprinkle the blood. So then you eat the basar on Sunday and Monday. But if you leave the blood overnight, which is why Rashi says what he says, if you leave the blood till the next day, and you instead of doing it on Sunday, you sprinkle the blood Monday morning, maybe it means that you can start eating the meat from Monday. Maybe it means you can then eat the meat on Monday, the day you sprinkle the blood, and Tuesday. So maybe you could shecht your carbon shlamim on Sunday, delay sprinkling the blood till Monday, and then eat it on Monday and Tuesday. So maybe that's all the Torah is telling me, that there's a connection between hakravat hadam and the 2 days of eating. Well, in Cain, if that was what the Torah wanted to tell me, it could have just said the word hakrivo. Yom hakrivo yochal. On the day that you do the hakrava, which is bringing the blood, that's the day you start eating it. Why does it say the word hakrivo et zivcho? Zivcho lamali. Why did it say the zvicha, which means the slaughtering of it? Shema mina, so it's clearly connecting those two things. That the yom ata shata zovech ata makrivo, yom shiata zovech yata makrivo. That there's a connection between the hakrava of the blood of the carbon shlamim and the zvicha of the carbon, and the shechting of the carbon shlamim. And those things have to be on the same day, and that's how we learn that you cannot leave the blood overnight, even if it's on the mizbeach, so it doesn't become possible lina, according to Rashi, and you're stirring it, so it doesn't become hard. You still cannot do it and save it till the next day. Okay, so that's the limud, very important limud. Now, to get more into this detail, and this is a really interesting machloka between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan, which is, again, the halachot of the shlamim are that you shech the shlamim on, say, Sunday, right? You sprinkle the blood on Sunday. You can eat it on that day, Sunday, u'lemachar, the Torah says, and the next day, u'liyom hashini, right? You can eat on Monday. Now, we, of course, assume, and we'll see why, that you can eat it overnight, right? So you can eat it on Sunday, the night of Sunday, which I guess is Leil Sheni by this point, right? The night of Monday, and you eat it on Monday, right? And then it says, hanotar liyom hashlishi be'esh tisaref. What's left over on Tuesday morning, you've got to burn. Now, we know from our Mishnah that you're really only allowed to eat it for 2 days and 1 night. So you can eat it Sunday day, Sunday night, and Monday day. Monday night, once the sun goes down on Monday, you're not allowed to eat the karban. But interestingly, you don't burn it until the next morning. So there's a big machlok between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan about the status of that night and what happens on Monday night. Because, again, the time of the karban is defined by 2 things. When can you eat it, and when do you have to burn it if it's left over? In every single other karban that we know about, it's the same time, right? A karban chatas, for example, you shech the karban chatas, you eat it on Sunday and Sunday night, and whatever's left over Monday morning, you have to burn. So the moment you stop eating it, you have to start burning it. And so we know that zman. The zman is, the achila is overnight, the sreifa, meaning the notar, is the next day. But by shlamim, there's a gap because you can only eat it, we think, until Monday evening, and you don't burn it till Tuesday morning in this case. So what is the status in that gap, right? Meaning, is that considered to be chutz lizmano? And this has huge implications. Let's say you shecht your karban, and when you shecht your karban, you think, I'm going to eat the karban on Monday night, right? It's Sunday morning, so I'm going to eat it on Monday night. Is that called machshava chutz lizmano or not? Right? If it's a machshava chutz lizmano, you're chayiv pigel. But if it's not, then it's just possible, but you're not chayiv anything, right? So that is the machloket Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. So Itzmar, we had a saying, hamechashev l'or shlishi. If a person has a machshava that they're going to eat the animal or burn something on the third night, meaning, again, in our example, you shechted Sunday morning, which is Yom Rishon, Monday night, which is Or Shlishi. Is that considered to be chutz l'zmano or not? So Chizkiah says it's kosher. It's not chutz l'zmano, because you don't burn it till Tuesday morning. So Monday night is not outside of the zman of the shlamim. And Rabbi Yochanan says pasul. Chizkiah Amar kasher d'halo intak l'sreifa. It's not time to burn it. The Torah says you burn it on the third day. Rabbi Yochanan Amar pasul ta'itchile me'achila. Rabbi Yochanan says no, it's still pasul because you're not allowed to eat it at that time, and so you're basically having a machshava of chutz l'zmano, right? That is one machloket, and a very similar machloket would be, what if you actually ate it during that time? Ha'ochel le'or shlishi. What if you actually ate the animal of a karban on the third night, on Monday night, sorry. Chizkiah says you're patur, because although you're not supposed to do it, it's not considered to be notar, because it's not notar till the next morning, till intak l'sreifa. It didn't give you the time to burn it yet, to burn it the next morning. And Rabbi Yochanan says you're chayav, the Torah very clearly said you can eat it today and tomorrow, but once tomorrow ends, meaning once it gets dark on Monday night, you can't eat it. And since you can't eat it, it's notar, and you bring a karban if you did it by mistake. Tanya Kavati to Rabbi Yochanan. Now, in fact, there's a braita that, although Chizkiah says is very clever and exciting, there's a braita that says he's wrong. Says the braita, according like Rabbi Yochanan, kadshim nechalim liyom echad. Right, if you have kachim that you can only eat for one day, like a karban chatat, right? So you shech the karban chatat on Sunday morning, you can eat it Sunday afternoon and Sunday night, right? Really all night, but we made a gzera till chatzot. But those kachim that are nechalim liyom echad, michashvin bidaman mishetishaka achama. If you have a machshava that you're going to sprinkle the blood to make it into pigol, as long as you think I'm going to sprinkle the blood after shkiyat hachama, because once the sun goes down, you can't sprinkle the blood, as we just said, and therefore that would be a machshava chutz lizmano. I'm going to do it in the wrong time. If you think about the meat and the besar and the imurim, right, meaning the meat you eat and the part you burn on the mizbeach, then you're allowed to eat it and burn it all night long, at least midoraita. And so in order to make it pigol, the machshava would have to be, I'm going to eat it or burn it after tomorrow morning, right? That's true about kachim kadashim or kachim nechalim yom echad. Kachim nechalim l'shnei yamim v'layla achat, but shlamim, which is eaten for 2 days, Sunday, Monday, and the night in between, then mechashvin bedaman mishitishka chama. Then the machshava of the blood that makes it pigol is if you think I'm going to sprinkle the blood after the sun goes down. Ube'emurim, burning the parts on the mizbeach. Remember, you can't burn the parts for 2 days. You can only burn them for overnight. Then mishialeh amud hashachar. Then if you have a thought, I'm going to burn this animal tomorrow after amud hashachar, that's chutz lizmano. And bibisaram, eating it, mishetishka chama shel shnei yamim. As soon as shkiyat hachama on Monday comes, that's considered to be chutz lizmano. So unlike Chizkiah, the Braita supports Rabbi Yochanan that if you have a machshava, when you're shechting your shlamim, that I'm going to eat it on Monday night, that would be pigol. Amar Atan Rabbanan, we have another Braita which says, Yachol yehei nechalim la'or shlishi. This Braita says, you might have thought, if you just read the Torah, the psukim about shlamim, that the Torah says, eat the shlamim the day you shecht it, and the next day, and what's left over till the third day, you should burn. Says the Braita, you might have thought, well, you can eat it on Monday night. Yachol yehei nechalim la'or shlishi, because dinu. It seems like a logical conclusion. Zevachim nechalim liyom echad. There are some karbanot, most karbanot, that you can eat for 1 day, chatat and asham, etc. There are zvachim and nechalim l'shnei yamim. There's a shlamim that you can eat for 2 days. Ma zvachim and nechalim liyom echad. Just like the zvachim that are permitted for 1 day, laila acharehem, the night goes after the day, right? So you shech the carbon chatas on Sunday, you eat it on Sunday and the night after Sunday, Monday, the night before Yom Sheni. So you might say, it's Zevachim that are eaten for 2 days, it's 2 days and 2 nights. Talmud Lomar, therefore the Torah says, V'hanotar ad yom. What's left over to the day, what does it say ad yom? It's a strange saying. It's meant to say, Be'od yom hu ne'achal, ve'eno ne'achal la'or shlishi. That you can only eat them during the day, meaning during the second day, and not the third night, or shlishi. If that's the case, Yachol, says this is continuation of the Breita. Yachol Yisaref Miyad. You might think, okay, so once it gets dark on Monday night, if you have any meat left over that you forgot to eat or you didn't get to eat, it's notar. You should burn it right away, right? Yachol Yisaref Miyad. Burn it at Monday night. V'dinu. And again, it's a logical conclusion because there are Zevachim Nechalim Liyom Echad. There's many Zevachim that you eat for one day. There's Zevachim Nechalim L'shnei Yomim. And there's Zevachim that you eat for 2 days. Ma Zevachim Nechalim Liyom Echad. Just like this one day Zevachim Tekef la'achila sreifa. As soon as the time for achila is up, you burn them, right? As soon as you can't eat it anymore, the night's over, you burn it. Why don't you say that zvachim that are eaten for 2 days, like a shlamim, tekef la'achila sreifa, immediately after the time for eating is up, which you're saying now is shkia tachama of Monday, burn it right away, sreifa. Tamalomer, therefore, the pasuk says explicitly, Bayom hashlishi, whatever's left over, biyom hashlishi, be'esh tisaref. You burn it biyom hashlishi on the third day, not the third night. Biyom hatasarfo v'yatasofo belayla. That you always only burn the notar during the day, but you don't burn it at night, which of course gives the reason for Chizkiah, which we say is wrong, but Chizkiah's whole principle that even though you don't burn it, even though Chizkiah's idea was that even though you are not supposed to eat it beyond Monday night, since you don't burn it till Tuesday morning, that night is not considered to be notar, not considered to be chutz lizmano, and we of course concluded that Chizkiah is wrong, and that in fact it is, and that really from the moment that the sun goes down on Monday, that is considered to be notar, it's chutz lizmano, you just don't burn it till the next morning. Okay, says the Mishnah. Now this I think is finally the last Mishnah in this. I think I might be wrong. Is there one more? No, it should be the last one. I'm pretty sure. I just don't have my Gemara in front of me. So it says the Mishnah, the last cases of karbanot. I think it's the last one. Okay, got verification. The final Mishnah now of the parak on Daf Nun Vav Amud Bet. We are now up to sort of the niche karbanot. We'll call them. Sorry, I'm doing all my words here. The special ones. And those are, says the Mishnah, ha-bichar, ha-ma'aser, va-pesach. Remember, bichar is the 10th animal. That's not the ma'aser, sorry. The bichar is the firstborn animal, right, that you have. You're supposed to give it to a kohen. If it gets a mum, right, there's all kinds of rules about what the kohen can do with it. But the bottom line is you give a bichar to the kohen. The kohen is supposed to take it to the Beit HaMikdash, bring it as a karban, and then take the meat back home and eat it with his family, right? That's a karban bechor. A maaser is a Yisrael or whoever has it gets to keep it, but the 10th animal, a siri, a yavar tachat hashevet, that comes under the staff, is the maaser. You bring it as a karban, and you take the meat and you eat it as well. And of course, the karban pesach, which we're very familiar with, which is done on Yud Daled Nisan every single year. So those 3 karbanot are kudshim kalim. They are kudshim kalim, as we probably know. And they are shchitatam b'chol makom ba'azara, like the shlamim, like other kachim kalim. You can shech them anywhere in the azara, including the south or the east or the west and the north. Damam ta'un matana achat. Very interestingly, unlike the shlamim, which you have to do 2 that are 4 and put it all around the mizbeach, these are done just one place. So you don't have to be soviv. You don't have to go around the mizbeach. You just put the blood one place on the mizbeach. But of course, very importantly, you have to put it on somewhere in the mizbeach where there is the yesod. So the southeast corner would not be good, right? Because there's no yesod there. So you have to put it somewhere on the mizbeach where there's a yesod. But as long as there's a yesod under it, it's only one matana on the mizbeach, and you don't have to put it all the way around the mizbeach. Shina ba'achilatan. Now they are different in the way you eat them, meaning who gets to eat them, because a bechor nechal kohanim. The bechor is eaten by the kohen and his family. Maaser the chol adam. Karban maaser can be eaten by Yisrael, and anybody can share with anyone he wants. Those 2 karbanot are nechalim b'chol ha'ir. They can be eaten throughout anywhere in the city of Yerushalayim or whatever the equivalent city is of the Mishkan. B'chol machal, you can eat them in any way you want. You can cook them however you want. You can roast them, boil them, stew them. L'shnei yamim v'layla echad, for 2 days and 1 night, as we just saw by the shlamim. Very similarly, if you shecht it on Sunday night, and Monday. The Pesach is different. Pesach eino nechal ela b'layla. The Pesach cannot be eaten during the day. So if you shech the carbon Pesach, which they always did, on Sunday afternoon, you don't eat it on Sunday afternoon. You got to wait till it gets dark, and you have to eat it al matzot u'merorim, right? As we all know, at night. And of course, you only eat it that night. Eno nechal ela chatzot. You can only eat it till chatzot, right? Ve'eno nechal ela munuyav. You can't just feed it to whoever you want. It has to be people who are assigned to be part of this karban. Ve'eno nechal ela tzli. And you can't cook it any way you want. You can only roast it. So there are very special halachot about how to eat a carbon Pesach that are quite unique and different than every other karban. Now, says the Gemara, Man Tana, who is the author of this Tana, who says that all of these karbanot only need to, now we'll see what is special about him, but presumably the question is, what is special about this Tana that he says that the karban Maaser and the karban Pesach have to do Zrika only one place on the Mizbeach. So who is that Tana? Says Rav Chisda Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the Tanya. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, the Tana Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, we are, I think, 5 lines from the bottom. We're going to go because we have a few minutes till Shacharit. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Chalbo lo nemar, this is talking about the karban of the Bechor. It doesn't say by a Bechor that you should bring the Chalbo, its fat. Ela nemar chalbam, it says plural, their fats are brought on the Mizbeach. Damo lo nemar, it doesn't say the word its blood by a Bechor, ela damam, their blood. Limeid, this is to tell you that ala Bechor u'maaser u'pesach, that there's a category of animals that the Torah says it by Bechor, but you add other animals to that category, and that is the Bechor and the Maaser and the Pesach are tu'unim matan damim ve'murim legabi mizbeach. It tells you that just like the Bechor needs to have the blood and the parts burned on the Mizbeach, so too by Pesach and by Maaser, where it doesn't say that. Right? It says bring a karban, but it doesn't say how to bring the karban. Those are compared to Bechor, and the same rules of bringing the karban of the Bechor apply to the Maaser and the Pesach. I think I'm going to stop here because it goes for a bit. So we'll stop 2 lines from the bottom at how you know it has to be Keneged HaYesod. Yeah, I think we'll stop here.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Do Ashkenazim actually say the korbanot every day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I should say, I can't say I do it every morning. We read this parak of Mishnah we read this parak, Ezu Mekoman, every morning.
No, I mean, I do, but also,
Yeah.
but it's like I had heard that some people actually skip it, like to make it.
I mean, a lot of people skip it. That's
okay. All right. Okay.
No, but
we're not these people.
Absolutely. This is part of the davening.
Okay.
We'll stop there. A debate, it's the middle, but tomorrow's a short daf, so I'll leave him some space.
All right.
Stop there. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
See you. I might be away next Motzei Shabbat. I might record it.
Okay. All right.
We'll be in touch.
Okay. Bye.